first time ever, the SuperMotocross World Championship is underway. We're racing in SuperMotocross. Chase Sexton has won the first ever 450 moto in SMX. Watch it to the inside. Nice move.
All the way up to Brandon.
Yoshimoto wins by taking Charlotte.
Great ride, kid. Great ride.
Biao comes right back. He passed the ball. Hayden Diggin, he's up to third. And he is proven as a rookie.
Oh yeah, we did it. We finally have a SuperMotocross World Championship playoff race in the books. So much to digest and dissect in this episode of SMX Insider. Jason Wygant, Jason Thomas here, both on hand at ZMAX Dragway in Charlotte. To me, it was even more unique and more different than I expected, which is pretty bad since I've been on this show for 13 months or something saying that it would be unique and different. But to me, it really was. JT, I kept hearing riders surprised how much of a motocross feel it had because it looked like Supercross, but it really did feel like 50-50. What was your takeaway with the track and what we saw, how that changed the results?
Yeah, I think everybody went in guessing a little bit, and we saw that play out throughout the weekend. Riders looking for bike settings, trying to figure out what this SuperMotocross layout was going to be like, and that's going to be a moving target. Each round is going to look and feel a little bit different, so we're going to continue to see riders chase it. But I thought it was executed really well. I thought it challenged the riders. I think that there were certain aspects of the race that were more important than others, and we'll get into some of that. But overall, what a great event, what a great weekend, and what a great debut for this brand new playoff dynamic.
Yeah, we'll break down all the results here in a moment, but right at the top, I don't know if we could say Jett Lawrence had a win streak coming into this or not because it's not the Pro Motocross Championship, but that is a huge win for Chase Sexton and equally big for Joe Shimoda, who already had won that last motocross race, but I don't know if he was at the top of everyone's list going into this, but he is now because he has the round one win.
Yeah, he's really got a lot of momentum coming off of Ironman going into this race, and I don't think that many people took him very seriously as a contender for this championship. I know I didn't, right? Because he had been so inconsistent over the course of 2023, and he'd really ridden his way out of championship contention in those two prior series leading up to this. But he certainly looks like he's on a roll right now. The starts are coming together, and he's gaining confidence against these guys. And you could see him when he was behind them. He wasn't thinking about, hey, I just want to get on the podium. Like, he's here to truly win right now. And this is a different Joe Shimoda than we've seen for a little bit.
Might be a different Chase Sexton, too. This is going to be very interesting as we break down everything from round one. 30-second board time now. Many topics to go over from round one. And it starts down under. The Lawrence brothers have won pretty much everything they've entered this year, but that was not the case. They probably collectively had their worst day of the year combined here at this opener. Hunter down early in both races. Jett had his problems in Moto 1, was better in Moto 2, but didn't get the win there either. This was probably the worst day we've seen from them, not just results-wise, but I even feel like the vibe, the riding, it wasn't that same gold standard that we had seen earlier in the year.
Yeah, you wonder if it's that typical pro motocross hangover coming off of Monster Energy Supercross that we used to see. Take on another dynamic, it's tough, and we've seen it time and time again. That's what it felt like to me. I didn't see a lot of fire from those guys throughout really the whole day, and it'll be interesting to see how they go through this week. I can guarantee you they're a mix of frustrated and embarrassed about how this opening round went. So I think they will bounce back, but you could almost see and feel them coming in a little flat after such a great 2023.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we saw so many other riders keyed in on this, sensing opportunity. We'll start with the privateer, Ty Masterpool, who really focused on these races to prove he could race a 450 in a more Supercross-like setting. He's already proven he could do it in Pro Motocross. So he was scheduled to get an appendectomy. He put it off because it would have prevented him from racing these races. He's on heavy antibiotics. He told me he only has about 9 minutes of fitness in him in a moto, but he was probably the best starter of the 450 class of the two motos on average, and he held tough, borderline top 10. Not bad considering what he's dealing with.
Yeah, we've heard about many of the privateer guys have been dealing with issues and they're not going to race because of X, Y, and Z reason. Well, Ty Masterpool is on the opposite end of that. He is literally putting his health at risk to show up at these SMX playoffs. So it's hard not to cheer for him, knowing what he's going through, knowing the health fight that he's in. So anytime he's up front, I'm naturally cheering for him just because I know he wants to be out there. He's kind of putting his money where his mouth is as far as health and participation. And yeah, he's doing a great job even being out there.
One of the few things that doesn't change, Honda's still winning in the 450 class, be it Jett Lawrence or back to now Chase Sexton on top. That had to feel so good. Sexton, I feel like, put some pressure on himself after Ironman, saying, "You're not done seeing me win. Can't wait till I strap the Supercross suspension back on the bike." But boy, did he back up those words. He told me after the race, when he said all that at Ironman, he didn't know. He was just hoping. He hadn't gotten back on a Supercross track yet, but boy, did he live up to his own expectations.
Yeah, and I think he was just ready for a change, right? And we talked about this quite a bit leading up, that he really needed to look at this as a completely different series, turning the page on everything that went on this summer, getting back to the guy that he was last May leaving Salt Lake City. And you really saw that all weekend. He was right near the top in qualifying. Both motos, he looked like the best guy on the racetrack. And yeah, it was a great reset. I think he did a great job mentally of just forgetting everything that we thought we knew coming out of Ironman and going back to being the Monster Energy Supercross champion again.
We'll have more analysis of Sexton's great riding and our Fowler's Facts segment coming up later in the show. There are many other contenders we want to mention. Out of all the 450 riders we thought were reset and ready, I don't think we talked about Dylan Ferrandis enough. Ken Roczen certainly was someone I think in this format we thought could excel. They both did. They both get on the podium, one kind of quietly, one making a lot of noise, as Roczen always does. They were great.
I think Kenny had a little bit more noise around him because we knew he would be ready. He really excels in these types of events, but Ferrandis kind of came out of nowhere. To say that Supercross has been a struggle over the last couple of years would be an understatement, but you could tell that he's comfortable with the motorcycle, and that seems where everything stems from with him. If he's comfortable and things are right, you're going to see a very potent Dylan Ferrandis, but if something's wrong, he's not comfortable, I think he allows it to affect him more than some of the other guys, and his results really slide because of that. But man, he proved this weekend that when things are good, he can ride with the best in the world.
Yep. And Roczen did mention on the podium there that a little bit of a sweat issue in the goggles hurt him. He didn't say that he would have beaten Sexton and Lawrence if that hadn't happened, but we might even see better from Roczen going forward. One other rider I want to mention real quick is Tom Vial, who battled for the 250 win, and he's showing his versatility, and that is key because this SMX track, to me, that was the star of the show. We talked about it in general at the very top here. It had such a more of a motocross element. It wasn't the Atlanta Supercross. It wasn't Daytona, and it was very tricky for the riders with the bike setup and everything else to get it dialed in.
Yeah, well, it's completely different than anything we had seen, right? You didn't have the standard Supercross whoops. You had some of the motocross elements, which really, I think, was the sticking point for a lot of riders. The track got a lot rougher than many of them expected, right? It's perfect in the morning, even a little muddy, and then it got rougher and rougher and rougher. And some of the sections turned into almost a full-on motocross section. Think about the sections that were on the far end of the dragway, really fast, rough. So the settings of the motorcycle, I think, played a huge part in the weekend. If you got them right, you could really push and move forward. And if you didn't, you really struggled. And I think Jett Lawrence was the biggest one that struggled there in the first moto. He just could not get it together in that first moto because I think they were just off. They were just off on the settings going in.
Let's look at the points going into our next SMX event. The points reset has a much larger impact than I realized. Chase Sexton comes in with the most points because he was the best rider in the regular season, and then he wins round one. Look at this gap, 12 points over Lawrence and Plessinger, who are tied for second. Now, we will have double and triple points in the next two races, but a 12-point lead after one round, points reset helped him big time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think depending on which side of the coin you're on, you're either going to love or hate this points dynamic, right? For Jett, he can shrug his shoulders and say, yeah, no big deal. The points are going to get crazy over the next two rounds. I can make that up, no problem. And for Chase, he's like, man, I came in as the leader. I put in a phenomenal weekend, and that could all be wiped away just by getting second or third at these next two rounds. So yeah, it's nothing we've ever dealt with before, this points escalator system we have. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think there will be some significant winners and losers just because of the point system and when they peak, right? When you have a good weekend or a bad weekend will be critical for how this all plays out.
Well, the right way to get your weekend started is when you first get on the racetrack, which at these races will be Friday. So we're going to give you the Friday schedule again. If you're anywhere near Chicagoland Speedway, come on out because we will have a press conference that fans can attend at 11 a.m. on Friday. Then right after that, the riders will hit the track for the very first time, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lessons learned for them. And don't forget, at 6 o'clock, JT and I will be back with some guests to do this show live, but we only have it. We don't do it here on YouTube. We only have it for the fans of the track. So if you're hanging out at Chicagoland Speedway. Come join us on Friday. That Friday riding dynamic got to be huge for the riders, JT.
Yeah, and I think they will be laser focused on trying to get the bikes sorted out this coming weekend in Chicago, because for anybody, think of Jett Lawrence, who struggled on Saturday. They're not going to go out there for a leisurely practice on Friday. They're going to be all about getting that bike dialed in, because I can guarantee you, and we spoke with Will Christian, who was there in between the first moto and the second moto, that was a frustrating feeling to be in the midst of the moto, getting pushed around by your contenders and knowing that you're just off on the bike setting. It's going to be a struggle till the end. So I think they'll be locked in. There won't be a lot of laughing and joking around. It won't be a free practice as it's scheduled. I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis about getting the bike exactly where they want it. So when they enter Saturday morning, there's not a lot of guessing anymore.
It was really cool before we leave Charlotte in the rearview mirror to get a race in what they call Race City, USA. This is the heart of motorsports really in America. I'd say the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and then of course Indianapolis from the IndyCar side. But the NASCAR country definitely interested in finally getting a race of this scale in their backyard. We know there's a lot of fans in the NASCAR garage. It was cool. Ricky Stenhouse came out. I saw him. It's on Adam Cianciullo's podcast. Got to check out the track. And Ty Gibbs, who grew up around this sport because his family once had a Supercross motocross team, was at the races as well. And overall, the fans. I mean, JT, you could sense it down there. This crowd was into it.
It's just one of the hotbeds of racing of all types, cars, motorcycles, whatever. So to think that these people would not be more locked in, the most would be silly. And you could see that, right? They were informed viewers. They were there on Friday. They came out to watch. They were there all day Saturday. You could see them. They were into it. Just walking around and seeing what people were wearing. They were all wearing endemic motocross and even car racing. It's just a racing family when you get into the Charlotte area. So yeah, long overdue to have a race. We haven't had a real race there since the MXGP race there 6 or 7 years ago. And then before that, you go all the way back to the Supercross in the late 90s. So yeah, long overdue, and it was a great time.
I think long overdue is this level of run now for Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki. We went down to the final race of the year before Kawasaki had won a race at all. Joe Shimoda gets it done with the 1-1 in Ironman, follows it up with this opening round win, and his teammates were up there. They were battling each other. What did we probably have 4 of the top 6 were Kawasaki's in some of these motos?
Yeah, and this has been a trend ever since Southwick, which Mitch Payton, gave us some insight on, that they found something with the engine package. They have been up front on the starts, which has led to better and better results. And it just hasn't been just Joe Shimoda. Ryder DeFrancisco finally made good on some of the really good starts he's been having. Seth Hamaker was near the front all day long. And if he could ever find a way to stay off the ground, I think he could be a true podium contender. So this team, whether it's Austin Faulkner, he won the LCQ, they've all been putting in good results and really climbing the leaderboard. As you can see, their motorcycle has improved. So, for a team that I think we've counted out for a little while, they just haven't had the great results that we've known them to have. They're back, and they're back in a big way.
Yeah, and so is Shimoda himself. These are the kind of results we expected to see at some point all year long. I guess it's better late than never. Doesn't get either of the titles in Supercross or Motocross. We're going to find out now if Joe can deal with pressure, because if he can, he could be your world champ.
Yeah, he's tied for the points lead, right? And for a year where I don't think things went to plan, I know there was a lot of frustration from him. He had really high expectations coming into this that he did not meet until the very end of the season. So this is the great thing about the SMX World Championship playoffs, is you get to reset everything, right? And halfway through motocross or during Supercross when he was missing races, to think that he had a chance to be the champion, leaving all this, the granddaddy of them all, right? This debut World Championship, I would have never considered that. And here we are. He's tied for the points lead. So what a turnaround. It just speaks to what this opportunity is for some of these guys. You can completely change the outlook on your whole season.
You mentioned tied for the points lead. So much went on at this opening round. I cannot believe we are this deep into the show before we've even mentioned Hayden Deegan, who won the first moto, was on the podium overall, and he is tied for the points lead with Shimoda. Moto 2 wasn't what we expected. Normally he puts on these incredible late race charges. It didn't materialize. Hayden said that crash in practice probably started to catch up with him. He was sore a little bit. But look at this. Shimoda and Deegan tied at the top. Hunter's still in it because he did have some points to the good coming into this. These point standings, what a battle right now.
Yeah, I think Deegan's right where he wants to be. He wins that first moto, had a little bit of a tougher second moto, but it wasn't a disaster by any means, right? He just couldn't close down that lead crew there. But tied for the points lead after one round. We're still in his real rookie season. And for the struggles he had at Unadilla, right? I think he feels in his heart that he let one get away. He had some struggles. You think about that first moto at Budds Creek that got red flagged. It just seemed everything was going against him. Well, guess what? Now's the time. You can right all of those wrongs over the course of the next 2 weekends and walk out of here, just like Joe Shimoda can with the World Championship here.
And what I like about this more than anything else, everyone was guessing going into Charlotte, and I don't know if much of what they learned can apply. I think it's going to be maybe 90% as much guessing coming into this weekend with a totally different type of track, Chicagoland Speedway. JT, you can show us what this is like. But this track is much bigger. It's in the NASCAR high banks and oval, not inside the drag strip. And the vibe, people are saying, is it might even have more of a motocross feel. So take us through it.
Yeah, so when we were leaving Charlotte, I just immediately went to this track map just to kind of think about what this weekend was going to be like, because I think Charlotte caught a lot of people off guard. And you look at the Chicagoland Speedway layout, it's fast. It's really long. What jumps out to me is that really long sand section in the middle. So for those riders that came in with a Supercross setting at Charlotte and when we're struggling all day, you need to continue to move towards a motocross setting, in my opinion. And James Stewart says it all the time, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And some of these rhythm sections, is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be, right where you want it in the stroke of the suspension and giving you that stiff feel you want? Maybe not. But you'll be able to go so much faster in some of these sections towards the end of the speedway. There's really fast sweepers. They're going to get rough. That's what they want. The track workers are trying to make it a hybrid between Supercross and motocross. And I think where the pendulum is swinging towards the motocross side of this much more than last weekend even. So I would be thinking motocross setup. I would really want to have my bike as plush as possible to allow me to charge this racetrack in Chicago.
Big interview time. We had Steve Letarte from our NASCAR and NBC coverage on a couple weeks ago. Now we can talk IndyCar with Townsend Bell, one of our analysts for the IndyCar series with NBC Motorsports. I know you're into this. I've seen you have some Supercross before. We have playoffs in our sport now for the first time, but more importantly, different venues, different types of tracks. Just talk about the chaos when something like this gets dropped into motorsports that's been pretty established for a long time, and then we throw a giant curveball into it.
Well, curveball indeed. Congratulations on a great event there at ZMAX Raceway. I was able to watch the highlights, and you're right, the track was truly unique. A little bit of Monster Jam maybe going on there with the start, the way the two lanes blended after the 180-degree corners. It was super fun. It reminded me a bit of Monster Jam, then blending into kind of straight rhythm on the start. So a lot of fun to watch. As an enthusiast, I'm constantly humbled by the skill, the athleticism, the bravery of the riders. But from a motorsports perspective, to answer your question, I think the curveball races are always ones that bring intrigue from everybody. The fans make their predictions, the drivers have their own assumptions or predictions about how things might play out. But the truth is, we never really know until we get to a new sort of format. In NASCAR this season, we saw it with the new street race in Chicago. And it was a wild card, Shane Van Gisbergen, that came in and beat all of the Cup regulars in that NASCAR street race. On the IndyCar side, we've had new street races like in Detroit this year, a brand new circuit, bumpy circuit. We've got some exciting things in the IndyCar series next year with a $1 million one race at Thermal in the desert. Non-points paying, but a race nonetheless. And so I think it's fun. I think it's important to mix it up in racing and frankly, keep everybody guessing.
Hey, one thing that they seem to have in common over the weekend, your championship finale there at Laguna Seca, it looked like a Supercross. What we would call block passing contact. There was so much chaos there. The title had already been wrapped up by Alex Palou. So is there a chance that because the gloves were off, so to speak, it led to more chaos? Because they were going for it over the weekend.
Yeah, it was full send mode. Some of it was pretty regrettable, I think, in terms of decision making. At one point, I referenced Wolf of Wall Street and driving the Lambo home, but I think the basic idea was that you had so many drivers at the end of their contract with that current team. So you take somebody like David Malukas, a young American who's getting a big opportunity with McLaren next year. Elio Castroneves in his final full-time IndyCar event. You had Felix Rosenqvist. He's moving from McLaren to the Meyer-Shank team. And then you had the championship, as you said, already decided. And I think when you put that combination together, it leads for the most part to a mentality of just absolute full send, zero consequence kind of attitude, like I'm only going for a win. And I think in the motocross, supercross world, that mentality at the start gate, more times than not, can lead to disaster. And it did in the IndyCar case this past weekend. So I think the biggest lesson for everybody in that race and for everybody watching is that the old crafty veteran that has won 6 championships, that always seems to stay out of trouble during chaos and keep a cool head, Scott Dixon, won again.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, and you can really watch some of the Supercross guys and their differing approaches. And I always come back to Jett Lawrence because he has completely changed the expectation for the Supercross world of what you should be doing at 19, and he just turned 20 years old. He would have typically, and if he was any other guy, he would have that mindset of, I'm just here to win, right? And we've heard Hayden Deegan say that on the podium time and time again. If I'm not winning, that's not good enough. Well, Jett Lawrence is willing to be patient and exude this patience and this strategy that most racers don't have, where Hayden Deegan looks like he would have been one of the guys with their Indy car piled up on the side of the raceway at Laguna Seca, and Jett Lawrence would have been Scott Dixon bringing it home, right? And that they're so close in age, to me, is a really stark contrast there. And I think it speaks to just, everybody's still a racer, right? Whether you're racing a car or a motorcycle, and it doesn't matter which continent you're on, you're still a racer at heart. But how you go about it can really differ.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jason, because in the IndyCar Championship, Alex Palou, the 2023 champion, is not a 40-year-old. He hasn't been doing this for 20 seasons like Scott Dixon. He's 26 years old. He's won his second IndyCar championship. And I call him the professor of precision, or sometimes the surgeon, because he is so methodical with his decision-making, his inputs behind the wheel, making high percentage, high championship point scoring decisions. So in that regard, I see a lot of parallels between Alex Palou and Jett Lawrence. So I think it's really neat to see young people that can grasp that concept. I certainly couldn't. When I was a rookie in IndyCar, I was a full send kind of guy, and I paid the price for it in a lot of ways, professionally and physically. And so it is fun to see young riders or young racers really grasp that.
Thanks for your time. And yeah, when you go out there on the motocross bike, be careful. We don't want to hear about similar stories with you. Just have fun with it, right?
I've had my fill in my younger years. So I'm all about vet track, high percentage tabletops, and I'm generally good for about 2 or 3 laps. And I try to match my Advil intake to my lap count, and that seems to be a pretty good formula for success.
All right, that's good advice. Yeah, on the Advil, I got to think about that one too. I'm already on the tabletop program. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, great IndyCar season in the books. You're going to come join us actually for the SMX finale in LA?
Yep, I live in LA and go into the Coliseum for your finale. Is going to be, I've been waiting for it for a long time. It's been a while since we've seen bikes at the Coliseum, and it's going to be incredible. So can't wait to see you all there.
All right. Thanks for the time, Townsend. We'll see you next week. And with so much to break down from the first SMX race, let's bring in our king of the calculator, statistician Clinton Fowler. I got to believe the top story here from a numbers perspective is Chase Sexton getting back on top like he was in Monster Energy Supercross. And I'm not sure this win streak was supposed to carry over for Jett Lawrence because it's a different series, but it didn't. So what did you see in the data between these two?
Yeah, absolutely, Weege. It feels like Chase Sexton used the Jett Lawrence Pro Motocross script to win playoff round number 1. He got a great start. He put down some blistering fast laps, and then he managed to lead. So I think the most impressive thing, 5 of the 6 fastest laps of the race were set by Sexton. And then JT, the truly impressive thing is that for the last 11 laps, he only set 1 of those as the fastest, and he just managed the race. And so clearly we saw a different Chase Sexton at round 1 of the playoffs. I just don't know how he did it, JT.
Well, this was a kind of a flashback to what we saw at certain rounds of Monster Energy Supercross. go back and think about when he got out front, when he was comfortable, he would set the fastest laps early. He would get a lead that was sustainable and just manage the race from there. And it felt like that. Now, the difference is he was never able to do that to Jett Lawrence during pro motocross, right? At times he was able to set a faster lap time, but it was Jett who was in race management mode. He would be able to hold Chase off and do what was needed. So it was a fundamental shift in what we've seen. Now the question is, was it a different venue? Was it a different mindset shift because of the Supercross suspension being back on and all those things? And only time will give us that answer. But it was a clear departure from what we had seen over the previous 22 motos.
Okay, and then Moto 2, what do the numbers show there, Clinton?
Yeah, Weege, it was it was a little bit different in terms of the script, but one thing was consistent. Chase had a speed advantage. We did see Roczen jump out to a great early lead. He set some really great laps in the first 4 laps of the race, but it was the last half of the race that I look at as the most interesting. That's where you had the mano-a-mano battle between Chase Sexton and Jett Lawrence. And the reality is Chase Sexton was fastest in 5 of those last 8 laps. And that turned into a 2.8 second advantage for Chase. And so you just see the speed advantage from Chase throughout the day. That continued in the second moto, which was just super impressive following what we saw in pro motocross. And so now, JT, the big question comes, can that translate into the next 2 rounds of the playoffs for Chase? Has he found something that is just going to maintain that advantage over Jett?
I can tell you he's got a lot more confidence now than he did, right? I'm sure he was telling himself all the right things, but he got confirmation of all of that positive reinforcement he was giving himself. And to me, the biggest moment of that second moto was when Jett really turned it up. And I made mention of it on the broadcast. You could see Jett really ramp the intensity, move through the pack because he wanted to get up front and chase Chase down. And Chase said, not so fast. I can match that and better it. It was just a really pivotal moment and maybe a pivotal part of this championship.
Anything else stick out in the data there, Clinton?
Yeah, Weege. I mean, there's 2 other riders I think that are worthy of showing. They might not show up at the top of the podium or on the podium this week, but Jordan Smith, local race for him. He grew up in Belmont, North Carolina, just 15 minutes from the track. He's also missed the entire pro motocross season, so he's coming off an injury. Had a bad start in first moto, but he went from 17th to 8th, which was great. But the thing that really stands out for me is he set a fast lap, a top 10 fast lap in each of the motos. I think that really bodes well moving into the next 2 rounds of the playoff. I think we should keep an eye on him. And then the other, you've got to call out rookie rider DeFrancesco. In that second moto, gets his first professional podium, which is impressive. He ends up going 7-3 for 4th overall on the day. So I think that really stands out for me. And he set 3 of the 10 fastest laps of that entire moto in that second moto. So that tells me he's got the speed to hang with these guys up front. So maybe we see something interesting from him in the last 2 rounds. So both Jordan Smith and Ryder DeFrancesco to me stand out as interesting and noteworthy for the weekend.
Yep, and that just could set us up for more surprises coming to Chicagoland. We'll see you there, Clinton.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Looking forward to it.
Okay, we're off to Chicagoland Speedway. Here's how you can watch. It's a return to what we would call a night race format. Peacock and the SuperMotocross Video Pass is the way to watch everything live. It starts at Race Day Live at 2:30 Eastern. Ryan Villapoto, Dan Hubbard giving you the qualifying coverage. We will have a pre-race show at 7:30 Eastern, and we go racing at 8 Eastern. Chicago is Central Time, so if you're a fan there, just keep in mind that the racing actually starts at 7 at the track. We will, however, have an encore on the big network, NBC, at noon Sunday. So that is awesome exposure for the superstars of this sport, racing in the playoffs for the first time ever. And the best part of all, JT, whatever lessons we learned from Charlotte, I'm not even sure they apply this weekend. It's a clean slate.
Yeah, I think for these guys, they really need to come in with an open mind. And as I mentioned, thinking about the Chicago track, think more motocross, right? They go into these stadiums, they want to set their bikes up stiffer. But I think if they didn't learn last weekend, they're just going to suffer the same fate they did at Charlotte. They have to be willing to soften those bikes up, soften them up to allow them to go faster. So we'll see who's more adaptable and who has learned from Charlotte and can apply it to Chicago.
That's what we like. The great unknown. We had it at round 1. We're going to have it at round 2. We'll see everybody from Chicagoland Speedway this Saturday.